And for this one, we're going to be doing something entirely different. I'm looking a little slummy right now, I understand that, and that is because I've been out in the garage in 105-degree weather building something. Those really useful boxes I enjoy talking about so much. We're going to build one today. Unfortunately, that means not too much FaceTime on camera today. Disappointment, I know. However, there is no better way to teach than to show, so we're going to do this step by step. Before we get started, I'm going to go over exactly what it is you're going to need in all of this. First and foremost, you will certainly need safety glasses. Pieces will be flying off of the acrylic and the really useful box, and you will certainly need these. This isn't just a precaution, you will get hit in the face with plastic during this. For the actual cutting, I used a Dremel along with a 1¼ inch fiberglass reinforced cutoff wheel, as well as a 60 grit sanding band attachment. Specifically, those are attachments number 426 and number 408 respectively. In terms of cutting, you can use the method involving an acrylic score and a putty knife that I explained in episode 6, however, I will not be doing that in this video. You'll also need some coarse sandpaper, though no specific number, just some coarse sandpaper. A hot glue gun, and if it has a high or low setting, have it on high at all times during this. Paper towels for those messy moments. A straight edge such as a ruler with a permanent marker, and of course your acrylic and really useful box. To be clear, this method will work with any sized really useful box, however I would not recommend anything smaller than this. Much smaller than this, number one, it is just easier to use a deli cup like I went over in episode 6, and number two, after a certain point the slings can escape too easily on these. These are more for very, very large slings and juveniles. They're not going to squeeze out of here. And now the part that you knew was coming, the disclaimer. As I have said multiple times in the past, I am not a handyman. Do not take advice on how to specifically use power tools from me. I'm the wrong guy for this. We will be dealing with a lot of power, a lot of RPM in this, and improper use could lead to injury. I very strongly suggest that you look up, number one, how to properly use these tools, because I will not be going over how to do that, and number two, that you follow all instructions that came with the tool. This tutorial is only to show you how to make these really useful boxes, not how to use the tools. All of that being said, follow all this at your own discretion. Let's go out to the garage. Alright, like I just said, safety first, put on the glasses. So that little wrench is actually going to be used to tighten that down. If you haven't looked up a tutorial, might want to do that. Tighten it as hard as you can because, again, high RPM. You want to crank this all the way up. I will be at 30,000 RPM for this, and this first part is in real time. This is going to show you exactly how fast I'll be cutting. You'll note it's not exactly fast. If you go too quickly, your cutoff wheel will actually begin to break, and you will have plastic flying everywhere. Do note that you start to get plastic buildup along the shaft. I'm actually not sure what that's called. Right below the cutoff wheel, you can see it building up as I'm cutting. You might want to routinely take that off just because it can fly off. It didn't happen for me, but it can fly off. And we're going to just blaze through this. I'm now going at about, 7 times speed right now. This isn't real time, of course. Yeah, you can see how much that plastic builds up. So from here, you can just pop it off. The plastic did melt together even though I did cut it. Just yank it off and throw away that piece. We will not be needing it again. From here, I'm going to be changing to the sanding bit that I spoke about before. So we're going to swap these out and take off that plastic that I was talking about. It slides right off. You don't have to peel it or anything. There will be a lot of loose bits of plastic all along here, which will be taken care of right now, actually. Same as the cutoff wheel, tighten it as much as you can. We'll be going at a much lower RPM for this one, so just keep that in mind. This is all at 15,000 RPM, and note what I'm doing here. I'm going in short little segments and then popping back. We're not looking to melt the plastic, and if you hang around the same spot too long, it will melt, so keep that in mind. All along the corners, you tend to get a lot of buildup of the plastic, and you're going to see me crank it up to 30,000 just for those parts. The 30,000 brings it right off, makes it pretty easily. However, it just tears up the plastic, so you want to go back down to 15,000 or a lower setting, and then even it out. You don't want to leave that torn up. And from here, once again, just going to blaze through at about 7 times speed. You'll notice that I'm switching the RPM quite often with this when I run into a thick patch, and then cleaning up after I switch back to the lower RPM. Again, do not leave that jagged edge. It will not glue right. From here, I just sanded down the edge. It's unneeded. It's more of an aesthetic deal. If you leave that, it's a little ugly and it takes 2 seconds to do, so we may as well make it look pretty while we have the sanding bit attached. Do you see all these pieces of plastic flying? I wasn't kidding about that. From here, melted bits of plastic did fall off and attach themselves to the lid, so this is just me going around and picking them off. From here, I threw on a glove, which is optional, but what we're about to do will get hot, and you'll want it. Get your coarse sandpaper, and we are going to sand the side. This is specifically to have somewhere for the glue to attach to. You want to do that entire ledge, and like I said, it gets hot, hence the glove. Don't attempt to use the Dremel bit for that sanding, by the way, it just tears it up too much. Grab yourself a paper towel and wipe off all the dust, all the extra bits, anything left. This is going to be the last step, so make sure you get all of those plastic bits off. You'll see me using my fingers to actually pluck off any of the excess. And that's it. We're going to do a close-up here so you can see what I'm talking about with the sanded edge. We need to focus, there we go. Now switching back to the cutoff wheel because we are getting ready to cut the acrylic. This is a full sheet of acrylic I got at Home Depot for about $15. It's one of the thinnest ones that they have because, again, this is a pretty small enclosure. I'm not too worried about bowing. So lay it right over top of the enclosure, mark your spots, and use a straight edge to actually measure out what we're doing. Obviously, I've already made an enclosure out of this piece of acrylic, hence the piece missing. From here, you need to just figure out what works best for you. You can see me troubleshooting a little bit here with a big sheet of acrylic. I will be attaching this using clamps, also optional, but the acrylic does tend to kick, and I'm not very strong, perfectly honest, nor do I have fast reflexes. So I clamped it down so I don't have to worry about that. We're going back down to real time here. This is exactly how fast I cut. You will be going a lot slower than you did cutting the really useful box top. The clamp is certainly getting in my way at this point. Now you want to listen that you're not straining the motor. Number one, it's bad for your Dremel, and number two, it's bad for the bit. Now these bits are pretty inexpensive. They are called cutoff wheels for a reason. They're supposed to wear down over time, but I have used the same bit for about 10 enclosures and I'm still using the same one, so it shouldn't wear down too quickly. Take it very slow. To be perfectly honest, we are actually melting the acrylic with this. We're not cutting anything. The heat from that bit is what's cutting the acrylic. That being said, pieces of acrylic, hot acrylic, fly off. So, again, safety glasses. And now I'm just repositioning because I still have another cut. And of course I sped this up. That was not real time, of course. Same way I did with the really useful box top. Now from here, you're going to see me pick off a lot of the excess melted pieces. It's not sharp at all. You can use your bare hands. A gloved hand does work a little bit better, but, you know, to each his own. Grab more paper towel just to make a smoother edge. You'll see me rough it up a little bit. Now, we want to put the acrylic in there and make sure we are lined up. If we need to take a little off the edge, we can. If we need to take some off the corners, we can. But mine worked just fine, so we can move on. In the meantime, we are going to start heating up the hot glue gun. We might as well take off the plastic sheet of the acrylic because we are done with it at this point. And I almost melted that sheet to the hot glue gun. After we take this off, put this somewhere safe. This acrylic does scratch very, very, very easily. Put it somewhere that's not going to get bumped. Remember how I said some hot glue guns have a high and low setting? Well, I set mine to high, and when I went to start, I found out it wasn't quite liquid enough. The holding power is the same, however, we have to go around the entire lid, and you don't want it to dry before you are done. So I'm just wiping off what didn't work. I'm also burning myself. Hot glue is hot. Safety note. And I waited about another 15 minutes to make sure the hot glue was nice and hot. Alright, so at this point it was plenty hot. Be generous with this, like I said in episode 6. This stuff is very inexpensive, you may as well go to town on it. This is also why we sanded the edges for the hot glue to have something to grab onto. I tend to use about a full stick for an enclosure this size. So lay a layer down of hot glue first, put the acrylic, and then put another layer of hot glue, paying special attention to the corners. That's what's going to hold it down. I really glob it on with the corners. Alright, so at this point I will be making air holes. The acrylic and the lid are done. I set that aside to dry. I'm going to be making air holes in the box itself, which is what I always recommend, so you have an unobstructed view and you will have cross ventilation. You're able to use your Dremel if you wish. You're able to melt holes into this. However, if you own a Dremel, I imagine you own a drill. Use whatever you need to do to get holes into this. I just went with a drill because frankly it is quicker than a Dremel. And from here, you can drill holes as you see fit. This is completely up to opinion at this point. You do want to go a little slower than I did here. I'm not showing great practice here. If you go too quickly, it can crack the really useful box. Luckily, I didn't have that, but it's something to watch out for. I was a little impatient at this point because, again, 105-degree weather today, and I was hot. Now that I'm watching this, I really shouldn't have my hand so close to the drill, something you should note. We finally have our finished product. So, this is the exact one that I was just working on. As you can see, this is pretty darn see-through. I don't know if you can still hear me when I'm talking into that. You can see through this just fine. This is, I would actually say, clearer than glass. You don't have that green hue to it. Now, do note with these, you want to spot check them for the first few weeks that you have them. Take off the lid, push up from underneath it to make sure your glue is holding. That's kind of how I discovered, hey, might want to sand it. It can pop off if you didn't sand it well enough. We don't want an escape. Check yourself for a few weeks. If after 2-3 weeks you're fine, then it's probably going to hold permanently. Like I brought up in my other video, really useful boxes do have 2 holes right there on the side that you can fit a little luggage lock through. So if you want an inexpensive locking enclosure, this will do it. Something I did not notice before right now filming this. Some of the really useful boxes have this feature. It's a downside to me. They open up. Now do note this only opens if this latch is undone. If the lid is on, the latch is closed, it can't open. But it does do that. Now the only reason I don't like this is because it is not watertight. I will be putting a humid species in here, and I'm going to have leakage when I go to water, so I'm not a fan of that. Something I would recommend staying away from in the future. If you want this specific sized box, because unfortunately all of this size comes with that open front, just get some hot glue or some silicone and go along the inside of it. That will resolve the problem. Alright, that was actually it. Now, a couple things to note here. First off, thick acrylic is nice, however, it's expensive and it's just unneeded. For those smaller, really useful boxes, the thin stuff is just fine. It won't bow so long as you follow what I showed you how to do. Concerning the Dremel itself, I'm using a 2-speed Dremel, model number 200i. It is at a 15,000 and 30,000 RPM. A 2-speed model tends to run about $30 to $50, depending on where you pick one up. I would not recommend a knockoff brand because, again, it's a power tool. You don't want to hurt yourself. Lastly, these boxes may not work with other exotic pets. I can speak from experience when I say that it does not work with centipedes. If you think that they can squeeze out of those lids, maybe make it and put it in a bigger box and run a test. Whatever you do, this is only for tarantulas. If you want to use it for another pet, maybe run some tests first. I truly do hope that this tutorial helped a few people. I know I went through more than a few dollars trying out pre-made enclosures that never worked to what I wanted. This meets absolutely all of my criteria. I have no complaints about these. At least give them a try, see how you like them. Alright, it was a very hot summer day, so I would like to go take a shower. That being said, this has been Aranyade, I've been EulersK, and I will see you next time.